If we're talking about impactful coaching, the number one reason why coaching is successful is the click or the matchmaking. If you feel that you click with the coach and you feel that the coach is like really listening to you and yeah, sees you, hears you, understands you, that's a very important basis for success.
Our ever-changing world calls upon the most courageous, resilient, and relentless of us to face its most extraordinary challenges. To help you embark on this journey, we present the Impactful Coaching Podcast, your oasis for inspiration and a beacon to spark the fires of greatness within you. I'm Joseph. I will be your ally in this journey to empower your potential. Join us each week as we dive deep into the heart of ambition, drive, and success to unravel compelling stories of daring leaders who dreamed, struggled, and achieved victory. Our journey begins now. Are those alligators on the mug?
Oh, no, they're the...
Oh, cats. Okay.
cheetahs.
Oh, cheetahs. Okay.
Yeah. Love it.
I don't know why I guessed alligators. That was putting all my money on green. All right. How is everybody doing today? I'm keeping that in, by the way. How is everybody doing today? This is the Impactful Coaching Podcast. My name is Joseph, and as always, it really means the world to me to be able to do this, to be able to collect this information. Am I using it for my own benefit? You better believe I am, but to also for the benefit of all of you as well. Today we have Elizabeth van der Bey. Thank you for being on the program. Before I get into question one, before I get into question zero, question negative one is, how are you doing today? How are you feeling?
I am doing very well. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joseph. It's end of June, almost summer holiday, so good time of the year. Yeah.
Just to date this podcast a wee bit, here in Canada, we're dealing with a little bit of forest fires. And so this is the first summer where I would step out onto my balcony and think the entire city was having a barbecue that I wasn't invited to. Well, it turns out that we're just dealing with a lot. So it's been a very interesting, very unique summer. So that's sort of where I am with it at the moment. I've also been on a kick lately, just asking people about their any recent trips or any recent traveling expeditions, just because I have that bug and I'm just trying to give that bug as much ammunition as possible. So any standout trips on your agenda lately?
So my latest trip was over the Easter holiday and we went skiing. There was snow, there was mountains, very different temperature, because here in Belgium now it's also, summer has kicked in. But so that was the latest trip. And then actually tomorrow I will be heading to the seaside here. So from the mountains to the sea.
It's quite the altitude shift.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, with that, now we're on to the formal questioning. This is the podcast prerequisite. If you listen to a podcast, you know it's coming, but what else can I do? I got to ask it. Would you kindly tell us what you do, what you're up to these days? What is the summation of your professional career?
So what I do is I work as a speaker and leadership coach, to be a bit more precise. Mm-hmm. And I help people who, of course, can actually already speak, but mainly high achievers, and they've come to a point in their career or business development where they feel there is a next level to reach and they feel they cannot get there by themselves. And that's where they come to me and hire a coach. Because usually at that point, I'm sure we'll go into that deeper later, they need to explore some of the deeper levels, do some inner work to be able to express themselves in new ways. And so that's the kind of work I do. I do mostly one-on-one with my clients, and it's a longer program. Usually it's 6 months. So there is room for enough iteration. So there will be a speaking engagement. We prepare for that together. Then we do the feedback. And so it's really a process of coming from internal growth and then seeing results on the outside.
Well, you said that we'll dive into that a little bit later, and I do have definitely one question, especially primed to dig more into not just the conscious issues, but also how things get into more of the subconscious and unconscious level. But there's a couple of interesting things that I'd like to unpack right away. The first is the leadership coach side of it is distinctive to me insofar as, I don't know how to put this in a polite way, so I'm just going to go direct at it. But leadership does bring about a certain kind of ego, right? So there is definitely a difference between being in to help somebody sort of rise to the level of those around them, but it's another thing to help someone who's sort of at the forefront of any particular dynamic. So, and this will be important because, the next thing that I also want to know is what brought you into the space. It's the backstory question. It's one of the other podcast prerequisites. So let's see if we can maybe answer both of these kind of in tandem. So, what brought you into the space? How did you start helping people? And how did you find yourself, working with those who are themselves in that leadership role?
So my backstory is that I always start with my latest job as an employee, where I myself was in a leadership position. Looking back, it was a bit before, around my 30s. I was in a leadership position. I loved it. It was challenging. I was working with a junior team, quite junior people. And I loved already, like whenever I would pick up something by reading or anything that was in the realm of personal growth, I would also bring it in the team meeting and help them grow. So I was already super like my mind was open for learning on those topics. So that was one first seed that was planted for my later career now as a speaker coach. And then in that same job, I was acting as the head of PR and events for a communication agency that was working exclusively for the European institutions. So we're talking European Commission, European Parliament. So organizing public events, high-level events and public relations projects. And then in that capacity, I was involved in these high-level events. And I would see commissioners, heads of states, ministers, important people speak at those events. And luckily, oftentimes doing it well, but even so often not doing so well. And I really always felt like communication is so important. People do certain work, people have certain ideas, good ideas, and then not being able to convey them, to inspire other people, it's such a missed opportunity, because the impact of great ideas, the impact of great spoken word is, of course, in how other people receive it and change their behavior because they're inspired. So I definitely saw an important need, and I felt like, wow, this is really something that I would love to do maybe one day. So that was another seed planted. And then another important driver in my work, being a woman, of course, I look at the world through the female perspective. Of course, I'm trained in my job also to look at things from different perspectives, but my own first perspective is that of a woman. And so seeing firsthand and having experienced also that women have specific obstacles, hurdles, self-sabotage when it comes to showing up in public and having themselves heard. So internal, hurdles, but also, the way we look at women, sexism sometimes, misogyny, or, toxic leadership. You know what I'm talking about, I would assume.
A couple of examples came to my mind, just here in the West. One of I'm a nerd, so I do play a fair amount of video games, and one of the biggest developers had a very recent and very substantial public display of misogyny, but they called it frat boy culture. So the idea that they got so far ahead of themselves that they've forgot to treat like half their workforce with respect. So I've definitely seen some issues in regards to that.
Exactly. So, and then thank you for sharing that. And so that's also a driver for me, the part of the helping women stay in their power and speak up. And I developed back in the days my own workshop, Powerful Speaking for Women. And this has, although today I work with both male and female leaders, and I love to also work with men, but this idea that we have biases, that it's important to learn to appreciate what is special about other people, regardless of their sex, their gender, race, whatever you want. But this idea of honoring diversity is also an important driver in my work. Yeah.
When it comes to seeing things from other perspectives, I'd like to understand a little bit more about the flexibility of that. So are there certain frameworks that are going to be consistent? So for one, I guess it's always going to be from a human perspective. So that's probably one factor that's always going to be in it. But so in trying to develop and trying to see the male perspective, how much luck have you had on that? Was there certain driving factors? Was there a methodology, or how well would you say you've been able to accomplish that?
Yeah.
That's one example too. I'd like to hear another perspectives that have also stuck out to you.
With pleasure. So funny thing is, with my workshop, Powerful Speaking for Women, I once went to speak at a co-working in Brussels, and the event was for women. But then there was one man because he was also a member of the co-working and he was super interested in public speaking. So we had a reverse situation in the sense that oftentimes, especially in boardrooms, it's often all men and then one, maybe two women. And here it was the opposite. It was all women and then only one man. Actually, yeah, afterwards I interviewed him about this experience and he said it was really a first time in my life that I found myself in such a situation. And it was really interesting to see that actually, yeah, the women were a little bit concerned, like, are you okay? How are you feeling about this? For him, he learned a lot from it, like, oh, wow, to be in the minority. It really shifted his perspective. Yeah, so interesting that you bring this up because I was talking also, so that's one story. And the other day I was talking to a good friend of mine. We know each other from high school and our grandmothers were friends. But she said, yeah, Elizabeth, you have this sensitivity also for cultural differences. And for me, it's so self-evident that it's even a little bit difficult to explain where it comes from. But I know that I've always been very open-minded. As a child, I was reading so many books. I was super interested in different cultures. So there was a curiosity, I would imagine, that was driving me. And growing up, yeah, in a small city in Flanders, there's a specific culture and there's things you like about it and things you dislike. So you open up and you want to discover other cultures. And for example, I went to Italy to do my Erasmus exchange. It's a more Latin culture, from here being it a bit more Germanic culture. So yeah, it's always so enriching to see how other people look at things and how they behave differently. Yeah.
So what I wanted to move towards next, because there are certain things here that I'm keeping track of that I want to integrate into some of my later questions. So can you fill out the remainder of your backstory and just let us know, what brought you to your online presence? And actually, so this one I had primed here, but I think it's going to come up anyway, so I'll just mention my interest in it. It's, originally you had your company under a different name, which is Montes Public Speaking. And the rebrand was part of to focus more on promoting you as it. So that's something that is part of this I'm expecting to hear about, and we'll dive into a little bit of that too. So what brought you to the current platform that you have?
I want to compliment you on the research that you've done. So as many people, when I started my business, if you pay attention to it, a lot of people name their business that with a link to their name. And so Van den Berg means from the mountain, and then in Latin it's Montes. And then I like the idea of the mountain and the challenge and overcoming and climbing. So there's a whole symbolism around it. So I loved all of that, but it was also a little bit, people told me, yeah, it's a bit distant and that's not who you are. You have this actually strong personal brand that, why not put it more upfront? And so I worked, actually, this was at the beginning of the pandemic. I worked with a branding agency. And so we had a chat, and then they came up with this idea. Let's use these strong colors that's really in line with who you are. And you see some of them here in the back. And yeah, we're going to use your name because, yeah, that their words. You're such a strong and charismatic person, and you have this energy, and it's so inspiring for other people. So let's use that. I'm really happy with it. Very proud of the branding. Still, yeah, super happy with it. And also sometimes it feels a little bit weird to put yourself so much in the spotlight or in the front line. But it's also a way to embody what I teach people.
So one thing I'd like to say in commentary on that, and I would argue that this is somewhat of a generational thing, just because for me, I'm the first wave of people to really grow up being conditioned by the internet. And like I got access to the internet when I was like 9 years old, so it definitely imprinted, and it continues to imprint. What was that, 25 years later? And one of the things that we find about growing up online is that I think we are more primed to be more multifaceted, because I have an online persona, I have the way I behave on chat messages, I have the way I behave on calls, obviously the way I'm behaving while I'm working, and then which by the way also factors in, because there's behavior now that if I were to go to the office space, then I would behave a certain way, and then I would go and talk to those same people online while I'm in the comfort of my own home. Same work, right? Same people, but the environment totally changes, and I almost feel like I've become a different person. So, does anything that I'm saying there spark within your imagination? Did you, especially because of the prevalence of the internet and the prevalence of COVID, have you identified more different variances in the way people are really presenting themselves?
Yes, it's interesting that you mention this idea of online persona. What I encourage my clients to think about is developing their stage persona and also their leadership persona. And this is about, taking on different roles. As we go through life, our identity can constantly shift because we grow. And some people at some point, they're a little bit stuck, or they know they want to go next level again, but they don't know really how to get there. So this is a really important part of my work, to go to that identity level and to explore how you can stay true to yourself, because clearly my clients, they want to be true to themselves, authentic, but at the same time show up. Actually, there's a playing field, right? There's a playing field. Think of a triangle. There is you, there is the context in which you operate, and there is the desired effect to which you speak, show up, and adapt maybe your energy or how you show up to invite them to that option and to make them feel comfortable with that is where there's a lot of growth. Yeah.
The next couple of questions that I have are aligned towards your work specifically with your clients, and I thought this first one would be interesting, especially considering that there's a lot that we've established in regards to multiple perspectives and really being able to try to understand people from different parts of the world and different backgrounds. So if I had the means, motive and material to consult with varying coaches, I don't, but if I had that material, one thing I would see a lot of value in is talking to people from different parts of the world. So I'd like to hear first, really specifically from your particular background, what from your nationality and lived experience, if I were to say hire someone in Canada or in the States or in Africa, I feel like different coaches from different parts of the world would teach me things a little differently.
So I'm from Belgium. It's a small country in the middle of Europe, with Brussels as the capital city. I think the beautiful thing about Belgium is it's a small country, so we do have a lot of international influence. Typically, we also have the history. I mean, back in the days, the Dutch invaded us, the Austrians invaded us, the French invaded us. So, and I lived in Brussels for 10 years, which it's a very international city. So I think that's interesting that all these influences, because I've come from such a small country. Interesting thing is that now I have a client and she's from Qatar. And actually, I was like, okay, interesting. She's from Qatar and she really wants to work with me, because she was saying like, oh, this is meant to be. And I was like, this is really interesting, because clearly there must be coaches also closer to where she lives. But then, so I asked her, I was like, honestly, I'm just really curious. How come you chose to work with me? And then she said, I felt connection. I felt I could truly trust you. I felt you are passionate about your work. I think what is attractive for many of my clients is when they apply for a sales call, a clarity call, they get to talk to me. And so they know firsthand that it's me they will be working with. And if we're talking about impactful coaching, the number one reason why coaching is successful is the click or the matchmaking. If you feel that you click with the coach and you feel that the coach is like really listening to you and sees you, hears you, understands you, that's a very important basis for success. So is this a typical Belgian thing? I don't know, but this is typical for me, who is from Belgium.
I like the idea of a clarity call. I can't say I've heard lots of different calls, prep calls, discovery calls, but clarity call, this is the first that I've heard of it. So one of the things that I'd like to hear about is, do you by any chance go in with a certain, okay, if there was a better word than agenda, I would go with it, but I'm going to have to go with agenda. Do you have certain goals? Is there certain things that you're keeping your eye on? Like you're receiving one thing in context on the surface, but there's something unconscious or kind of beneath the surface that you're trying to keep your eyes out for.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned it before, this below the surface, unconsciously. So first of all, if people reach out to me, they've seen some things online, or oftentimes it's via. So they already know something about me, my energy, my vibe. And then if you were to book a clarity call with me, then you book the appointment, of course, and then we send you a questionnaire. So some questions like, why is this a good moment to contact Elizabeth? What would be, what does success look like for the coaching? And so there is quite some questions, I mean, not too many, but the right amount of right questions. And so I see the answers to the questions before we go in the call. So I get the feeling of who this person is, what is the struggle, what's the dream. I can look them up on their website, their LinkedIn. So I get a pretty good feeling already of the person. And then we explore this further in the clarity call. And I leave it. So my agenda in those calls is really like, does the person resonate with me and with my approach? Does the person feel I am the right person to help him or her reach the goals he or she wants to reach? And that's the idea. And I, of course, I explain a bit my approach, and then I explain how I would help the person and what the journey can look like. And then I leave it with them. Yeah.
And at this junction, there's one thing that it's just a personal curiosity to me, but I imagine that the ratio of men to women who reach out to you is probably skewed towards women, but
it's not actually.
It's not? Okay. Well,
funnily, yes, more. No, I'm
so
always
is it
surprised
50-50?
About this.
And so let me rephrase it then. In terms of the branding, there is a little bit more of, I guess, an expectation to appeal more to the female demographic. So when men are reaching out to you, why are they doing it?
That's an excellent question. So some male clients have said it explicitly. I want to work with a woman. I think it's, okay, I'm assuming here, but I think I can also say I have a pretty good hunch about this. Again, you can coach well if the person feels safe. And you can coach well if you can create a context, a safe space where the person can open up. Mm-hmm. And I think in a oftentimes competitive world, it can be challenging for men to find that space. And then they feel like it's maybe a little bit more open, a bit more soft, a bit more, I'm not going to say necessarily honest, but they have, I think that's the vibe, what attracts them. Yeah, softness, some female energy, and not that you would never be able to find that with a male coach, but it's definitely a thing that men choose to work with me, a female coach.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'll say a few things about it just because it's an interesting point in the conversation. So I'm not the most prolific reader. I should be because I'm trying to become a writer, but one day at a time. But one book that stuck out to me, it was called Magician. I'm gonna get the order wrong, but it was Magician, King, Soldier, Lover, and it's just supposed to be this new take on male psychology. And what they talk about is this idea of an alpha male, someone who's just trying to get one over everybody else and wants to be dominant, but in an immature and in really a sickening, unhealthy way, is not the positive male energy that we should strive towards. It's supposed to be more like the nurturing father, the protector. Sometimes, you do have to draw your sword to defend the things that you love, and that's the correct way to use that energy, but not the correct way is to be on that attack and try to minimize and mitigate the people around you. So I do think that there is a lot of issue in that environment and those competitive environments. And speaking to what we mentioned earlier is that it makes it harder for the right ideas to get through. So I would at first, my guess, if I were to figure out the answer to the question on my own, I guess it would have been, well, I have a speech and I know there's going to be a lot of women in the audience. So I probably want to tailor my speaking engagement more to the audience. So that might have been a very calculated way to select it. But I do think it's important too for male energy. It's more healthy when you absorb female energy in the way that we're supposed to and not reject it because we're just trying to come across as just pure male energy. So, and I'm not the toughest guy in the world, right? So that's kind of like how I can have a little bit more of a free-form perspective on it. But that's what my takeaway is from what you've described.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for adding that to the conversation. And clearly, what I see back in the days, not so long ago, as a male CEO, communication simply was top-down, command and control. but those days are over. And they also, CEOs, leaders of companies, they also feel now it's more about employee engagement. People have difficulty, companies have difficulty finding sometimes people, or there's been some crisis, so they go through change and they have to keep people on board and motivated. So it's a different approach is needed. To give a very clear example on this, recently I worked with a CEO, and so he had come as far as he had come more like by the manager style, like clarity and let's do this, and presenting with slides, like, yeah, this is the plan, let's do it kind of style. And I mean, I have no judgment. This is what he did, and this is what brought him and his teams as far as they got. But then what happened? Why did he come to me? There was a merger, so he had more people to manage, more teams, merging two cultures. And so from being more like the managing leader, a bit more, but he was a very nice guy, and he had this empathy within him, but it did not yet translate in how he showed up on stage. Mm-hmm. So his challenge was to go from this more managing leader to the inspiring leader. That was his next level. He was the go-getter, the making sure things were done. But then, inspiring also means, slowing down. So this means if you want a bit more female energy, slowing down, connecting, let people come to you instead of, not that he was pushing them over, but pull instead of push. So there is, in general, this shift for all leaders who want to inspire nowadays from back in the days, command and control, army style, if you want, to we want people who inspire us, people that we decide we want to follow, people that we decide, wow, this is inspired, this is motivating. And so this is a beautiful part of my work, to help people grow into these different styles. I'm happy also to reveal and that I make people aware of there's more styles, but a nice way to approach this is with the model of there's clarity style, clarity speech, bam, 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 let's do this. This is the plan. That's the leading style, and you need to master that as an accomplished, well-rounded speaker. But then there's also the inspiring speech. I inspire, I tell stories, there is characters, there's emotion, interesting things happening, and let me take you on a journey. So the inspiring speech and the trust-building speech. If there is a big crisis, and you need to bring safety with your words. Trust building, so people trust and they feel safe, so they can come with you in the change. And then when they feel safe, you can go back. So it's about learning, making these styles your own. At first, it can seem like, oh my God, Elizabeth, the trust building, that's not me. But then, at first it's uncomfortable and it's not you, but then you practice it and then you make it your own.
It reminded me of, no, this is something that gets into which I don't want to get into. I'm just letting people know where the context came from, but a lot of a conversation around freedom of speech. And one example that is often brought up is is it freedom of speech if somebody yells fire in a crowded theater? Well, if there actually is a fire, then yes, that's the right thing to do. But there does get to a point where speaking is purely a matter of circumstance, and you're using your words in order to, command and control, but to create movement, to save lives. So I think there is a blending of the emotional connection and even a spiritual connection and a high-minded connection. But then there was also that blend of actually trying to, so the word that is coming to me is manipulate, and that's not the word I want to use, but that's kind of the word that I feel like I'm kind of stuck with for the time being. That's
but I'm glad you
affect some kind of change in a way that is actually tangible and physical.
I don't like the word manipulation either, because it has a negative connotation. But I do teach sometimes the art of influencing. But I want to attract, and I do attract clients that use it for positive purposes to make a positive impact in the world, because then it's something super beautiful. Yeah. But it's true that, influencing, motivating, inspiring, influencing, it's sometimes not far from manipulating.
Actually, I was going to tell you this interesting perspective, and then I was going to move to the next prepped question. So, because you mentioned somebody, how somebody might command in the military, and I'm going to be very, very loose, by the way, because I am talking about previous people that I may or may not be still working with. But I had one person who I worked for a while, and he had come from IT, but his command style was very militant. So it was always like you would come in to the meeting, say, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And if things didn't go his way, he kind of lost his marbles. Now, I do have a current client who, again, I'm just being very loose and respectful here, but he was a former Marine, and he does come from that command structure. But he has the most like hands-off, non-micromanaging style that I've worked with. It's mostly like, all right, Joseph, you doing everything you're supposed to do? Yeah. All right. It's good. It's good. And then he just goes about lives his life. So it's really funny to me because you would think that their personalities from their backgrounds would be totally different. But in reality, a lot of our innate persona is just, yes, the environment can influence us, but we're also the influencers on our environment too. And so a lot of our just inner cycle comes out and manifests in the environment that we happen to be in. So we do have control over our environments as much as our environment can control us.
Yeah, we do. And actually what you're mentioning, it makes me think of sometimes I have this, I mean, I did not invent it, but I made my own beautiful PDF on situational leadership, because this also gives depth to speaking styles, because speaking style, leadership style, clearly they're intertwined. And then in the situational leadership mapping, there is directing, a directive style. It's like the clarity, coaching, supporting, delegating, and then you adapt it not only to the person and their experience, but also the task at hand. And so it's always interesting to explore this. And talking about people from the military, and funny story, I recently met someone who's quite a senior at NATO, and I met him through a common friend at the comedy night, and afterwards we went for a drink, and then I drove the comedian home. She's a woman, and then she said, and he's a great friend and such a nice and kind person, and he was such a, but then he also said, like, I work at NATO, but I come from the military, so it's quite and she said, once we said, let's go for a drink, and then they were gonna have a tea, and then she said all of a sudden he blurted like, drink your tea. And she so it's interesting that there's also this whole what's your personality, what's your natural style, how have you adapted to the context, how have you been nurtured or trained, but it's really beautiful for me to work on all these like edges and to explore that and to make it playful. I think to go back to impactful coaching, it's so simple to say this, but many clients also ask me this. They say, I want to have fun, I want to experience joy when I speak for an audience. Now it induces me fear or anxiety, nervousness, and to make this, all of this, and what we mentioned, the different roles, different styles, to play with it, to experiment with it. It's just so much fun.
And that is something that I know that you've talked about in the past, and I think it'd be a great tidbit of knowledge to share with us today. But there are ways that we can deal with nervousness that are not necessarily internal. Sometimes it's also about how you get your audience to feel less nervous about you.
Yes, love that. Yeah, I often say this, like, in order to, because there is first you need to feel safe, create inner safety, then you want to feel comfortable, then you want to feel confident, and then there is room for joy. Well, it's not, I mean, all so separate, but it's interesting to think of these 4 stages in a way. But I oftentimes hear myself saying, like, think about this. In order to feel safe yourself on the stage, focus on making your audience feel safe and welcome, and so they can relax and open up and not go into resistance, into activate their critical minds.
There's some advantages to choosing like working one-on-one versus group coaching that I could kind of work out on my own. Like, you can have more personal time, or you can be a more collaborative and sort of a networking environment. If there are less evident pluses and minuses to personal coaching versus group coaching, I'd love to hear more about that. So what are the things that people might not expect or might not realize they're going to get out of working personally or working with a group?
Okay, so good question. I also want to say already now, I'm loving this conversation. I love how well prepared you are, or yeah, your
10
thoughts.
years. I appreciate it. I really do. Like I said, it does mean a great deal to me to be able to do this. So I want to do the best that I can at it.
Doing a great job.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Joseph. So back to the question, yeah, one-on-one coaching or group coaching. Okay, first of all, for me, the one-on-one coaching, it's because I love to do the deeper work. I always say I do the deep work. Enough of it. I don't endlessly stay stuck there, but it's so important to do a bit of that deeper work because that's, especially with the people I work with, that's where the difference is going to be made. See as they get over themselves, self-sabotage, blah, blah, blah. But then, yeah, I'm also super pragmatic. I want to see quick wins. I want to see results. I want to see them liberated to do things differently in the leading and the speaking. So the one-on-one coaching gives plenty of room to do this deeper personal work, which really is the key for great transformation. What else is there to say? Some people definitely prefer the one-on-one work, like this one CEO that I mentioned. You know, they're very busy. They want all the attention on them, and they want to move forward quickly. This being said, working in small groups and not too big. I mean, big group energy can also be great, but I do sometimes organize a group day, and then it's also amazing how the group, how much they learn from each other, and how also when I do one-on-one, I am the safe space. If we're in a small group, I make sure to create a bigger safe space, and this can be it can touch people deeply to feel that they're also, supported and carried and encouraged by the group, especially if they work in a not so nice work environment. And then to feel the compassion, the love, the encouragement from a group can be very healing even. And it's, so both have their strength. And I don't even really have a strong personal preference because actually I'm going to, next year, end of this year, start up in small group because I still want to have the depth, but then to have this value from peer to peer also in there. So it's a personal preference. Of course, now if people want to work with me, it's mostly one-on-one. Yeah.
So I pose this question to you, but it is also if you hear about this from your client side too. But you know, what challenges are you and your people facing in terms of getting the message out, in terms of either social media, ranking on search engines, sharing content? What in that space are you finding are some of your major roadblocks? And if your clients are facing those two that you're talking about, then by all means, I'd love to hear about that too.
So in sharing the content, in writing the content, I do it close to my work and close to who I am. My intention is, I want people from the content that I share, I want them to have a feeling about who I am, what my vibe is, what I have to offer, what it could feel like to work with me. So by sharing that, so the idea is really like I share, and then with whomever it needs to resonate, it will resonate, and then the right people will find me. That's the idea. Like if I send out my vibes, then those who need to receive those vibes, they will pick them up, and then I'll be the right person for them.
So I think it's a matter of magnetism, is just looking to attract the kind of energy that you're trying to attract.
Yeah, and this is really, I mean, interesting also to for in my work, because people always struggle. I mean, if you do speaker coaching, because somewhere there's a struggle. I mean, also ambition. They struggle with this dance between staying true to yourself, can I be myself, and then adapting to the context, and then knowing that your power is always to be found close to you, is always to be found staying true to yourself. And this can be more challenging in corporate environments, but this can also be challenging for entrepreneurs. For myself also, sometimes I do find myself that, I went a bit adrift from my true core, and then I remind myself again, like, no, the more you are yourself, Elizabeth, the more you will attract the right people, and the better a coach you will be. But it's important to be mindful of this, because it's not always so easy, because have some doubts or yeah.
Yeah, well, as I hear that, it just reminds me of the rebrand that we had mentioned too, is going from something that, while still related to you in one degree of separation, it wasn't the same as using your name to really convey who you are. So that's just what your answer reminded me of. So the next couple of questions, these are the ones that I've been sort of foreshadowing these. So I'm going to say the question that I'm asking here is really about if you're looking for something, if someone has an issue on the surface level, and if the solution to that was something deeper. And I'll actually put myself on the spot here too, because I had to go through this. So this show is very fresh, so I've only done a few episodes with it so far, but I do have a lot of prior experience. And what I noticed, even with some of my very recent work, is that I was talking faster than I was thinking. And so what would happen is I would start stuttering and gerbling and jumbling, and then so I've been making it a mission, and I know I still do it because I review my stuff, but I've been making it a mission to either stop, think, slow down, construct my words, almost more like a writer, because I write a lot, so I do have the muscle memory built up to it, so I'm almost like I'm kind of like actively writing. And now I noticed the reason why I had this problem for such a long time actually came from high school. My friend group, who I hung out with for like 4 years, were very impatient. So if I wasn't talking right away, I wouldn't get to say my piece, and then somebody else would take over. So that lack of patience was a really strong imprint on me. And it took me a long time to remember that, okay, maybe I need 5 to 10 seconds to think so that I can actually say something that's not dumb. And that's how I've realized, okay, this is where it's been coming from. This is the effect that it's having. This is what I have to do to actually resolve it. And now I'm not, it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but at least there has been progress there. So that's me. That's sort of what I'm going through. And so I would like to hear you personally, or again from clients as well, that process of like, what was this person going through, and how did we correct that to correct the other thing that we thought we were working on in the first place?
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for sharing this story, because the symptom is I speak too fast. I hear this all the time. People coming to me and then I speak so fast and la 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 la. And then, of course, if it were as simple as telling to yourself, let's speak a little bit slower, it was easy. But of course, it's interesting to see, okay, what's behind this? Where does the pressure, is it, in your case, you were pressured to speak fast. Mm-hmm. So you taught yourself to be a fast speaker. But oftentimes, like, the fast speaking is linked to the fear of being in front of the group, the fear of having all eyes on you. And there's several things at play here. So I'm going to try to unpack this for the audience. So all eyes on you. We don't feel comfortable. Maybe we feel even a bit threatened, because like when like cats, when they stare in the eyes, it's an act of aggression, right? So there's that. Maybe someone's looking at us. Maybe they're preparing to attack us. So we have this thought deep down in us. So we're not comfortable with that. And so when we're asked to speak in front of an audience, so first of all, we often don't breathe properly before, because we're highly stressed. And then so no proper breathing, fear of standing in front of a group. So the result is speaking too fast. So I really unpack this with my clients and explore, like, what can you do to support yourself? What can you do in order to feel safe? And what can you do? And this is the key, because I have to speak in front of a group. As long as I hear myself talking, I feel safe. So I keep on talking, even if my inner critic says, oh, you're blabbering. What are you actually saying? This doesn't make sense. Still, as long as I hear myself talking, I feel like, okay, I'm doing now what is expected of me. And then there's the fear of the pause. And I make my clients aware of this. And I tell them, well, maybe now the pause is your enemy that you fear, but I want you to become friends with the pause. Because now pausing is like, oh my God, if I pause, if there's a silence and everybody looks at me, I'm going to die. I mean, this is how it feels. But then to reprogram, this is reprogramming. And that's why I love the one-on-one work, because especially in the first session, there's a whole lot of reprogramming happening. if you make the pause your best friend, the pause is the moment where you always can come back to yourself, back into your power. The pause is the moment, is if you want to serve the audience well, you want to give them time to process what you have just said. So tuning into that is a beautiful thing. A little pause so they can nod or they can process or they can add, because people always relate everything back to themselves. Give them a moment to do that. Oh, this happened to you? Ah, yeah, it also happened to me. Yeah, interesting. Mm-mm-mm. So give them some time to think. So the pause is, yeah, the pause is everything, right? The breathing and the pause, it's the basis. And so teaching my clients to embrace the pause and to use it to their advantage for feeling well and safe on the stage, and to use it also in the advantage of helping the audience to understand them, make it easy for the audience to follow you. Is such a it's so simple. And actually people, I always also say this is not rocket science. Somehow somewhere people know this, but it's difficult to do this on your own.
I've never thought about this before, but you reminded me of, I don't watch too many sitcoms these days, and a lot of sitcoms these days don't use laugh tracks. A lot of them are more like Modern Family or The Office, where they're shot almost documentary style. But a lot of the sitcoms, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s, Friends, Fresh Prince, they would have these laugh tracks. And so we'd be watching Seinfeld, and we'd be watching these TV shows where the actors are having interactions, but then the laughter occurs and the actors have to wait until the laughter is over. And so you're constantly seeing these characters pause with each other. And this is the first time I realized that that's actually quite realistic, because people need time to stop and take in and absorb what people are saying. It just so happens that it was a matter of circumstance for these shows, because
Yeah.
they cannot talk over the laughter, because then we won't know what's
Yeah.
about to happen next, and we got to give the audience a chance to laugh.
Yeah.
So that's just something that resonated with me with all of this too. And because for a long time you would see this criticism of, I bet if there's no laugh track it would be unrealistic, people would just stand and stare at each other. I'm like, no, people do that. Like sometimes
Yeah.
people are just dumbfounded by what the other person said and need a second.
Yeah.
So I've got one other one for you, and then because I know we get sort of wrapping this up. I really appreciate all of this talk about mindset, and we've sort of semi answered this. I think we've gotten a lot of the clues to it, but I'm going to ask it formally just because. So if I'm having this conversation with you right now, which means that with every passing moment, my inner narrative is going to start becoming more fresh on my mind, versus if I were just listening to you constantly. Like, you know what I mean? Like if I subscribe to your upcoming podcast and I start having your message over, one way or another, I got to deal with the person inside my head. And so can you expand on just how effective we can really program ourselves so that we're not just consciously absorbing information and trying to consciously change that, but to really unconsciously start thinking differently and ideally better?
Yeah. So it's not that I hypnotize my clients,
Yeah,
but I
understandable.
do. Yeah, with the years of coaching and the experience, I can, yeah, pride myself in, because yeah, I will never forget. Then I had the first session with a client, and then right after he sent me the text like, "Thank you for reprogramming me," because yeah, it's things people are not aware. So it's not so difficult to actually look at things differently, because it was a blind spot. They had no idea they could actually approach it differently. So that's a very, yeah, interesting one. And talking about mindset is very abstract. So I want to make this a little bit more concrete for the listeners. If you find yourself in front of an audience and you find yourself thinking, oh shit, yeah, I wish this was over soon, I don't want to be here. That's your mindset. That's the attitude that you take on the stage. And so I make people aware that you can shift it by another one, which would sound like, when I speak, it matters. When I speak, it matters. I take the time and I take the space and I give importance to my words. Totally different energy from, I don't want to be here. I wish this was over soon, etc. Very different mindset shifts. And yesterday, to talk about this, I was working with a client. I knew her already a little bit early from before. And I was tuning in before the coaching session with her and her energy. And what popped up in my mind was stop fighting. She has amazing magnetic energy, but she has also a bit this energy of a fighter because she was not seen as a child, and there was some misogyny in the family. And so she always felt that she had to fight. So that's an old pattern, an old pain that people carry that with them. And to uncover that, by uncovering that, you can tackle it. It's not necessarily so that it will go away forever, but to put it in it's a shadow. If you put it in the light, you can work with it. You can, turn it to your advantage, and more focus to what you do want. In a nutshell.
I really appreciate that, and thank for me. I also get to review this too, so it gives me a second chance to kind of go through things and come up with new takeaways from it that unfortunately I don't have the luxury of being able to come up with like right on the spot. But suffice it to say, this stuff really sticks with me, and so I really appreciate the conversation that we had today. So I'll just throw this one out into the ether really quick, just for the fun of it. But whether it was in media or TV show or film, or even just like in living your life, any speeches lately, or any talks, or anything that has really been a significant takeaway for you in the last little while?
I think many people saw it, the acceptance speech of Michelle Yeoh from the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. Beautiful title, Everything Everywhere All at Once, because I think that's often the feeling people have when they stand in front of a stage. There's so many things happening, and unpacking also that, like all the things that are happening, is interesting. But the way she spoke, and like don't let anyone tell you're past your prime. Now is every age is a good age. So it's a good example of when you get to speech to think of, make it quotable. I think it's a beautiful tip also for the listeners here. If you can say like a catchphrase, a power phrase, something quotable. And then I must say this week I saw, but I have to find it again, so a commencement speech, and there was someone from the school or university, and he was saying such beautiful things about bullies and unpacking that. But I have to look it up again. It was such a beautiful message that he brought. And I think I think if with your words have power. And if you can use them, if you want to use them to make the world a better place, or even to make one person's day better, some kind words, that's magic.
There was, and I'll just add one into this, just close us out, but I believe it was the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling. It's definitely, the target market is males for it, but it reminds people that whatever it is that you're going through is a responsibility that you can take, rather than a burden that you feel is thrust upon you. And if you go onto YouTube, you can see the poem read by Michael Caine, and I'm getting emotional just remembering it, and I don't even remember the lyrics of it. It's just it's a very powerful speech, and it speaks to that positive and nurturing masculine energy that I mentioned earlier. So that's one that I wanted to add into there, just to get into the ether. But with that, we are going to wrap this up. So Elizabeth, again, I thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. I understand that you've got a podcast on the way too. Yes. Is it live yet, or is it still in?
My podcast is called the Powerful Presence Podcast. The trailer is live. There is one interview live, and in the coming weeks, the first episodes will be launched. And it's gonna be very interesting, unwrapping also this idea of powerful presence, my basic teaching, a speaker is a leader, and what that means, etc. So,
okay, fantastic. And then just to go through the rest of that too, if you just want to let the people know about the remainder of your public platform, and if people are interested, how they might want to reach out.
If you want to connect with me, you can link with me on LinkedIn under my name. Or you can go to my website, which is as a simple name, it's speaker.coach. And there you can find more articles. You can book your clarity call with me, and who knows, maybe we work together.
Fantastic. I got to say, that is one hell of a domain. Like, congratulations to you for nabbing that one. That one is really going to stick. So
I have to say a big thank you to my husband, Jelle Annaars, because it's thanks to him that I have this domain, speaker.coach. Yes.
Well, we'll hang on to it, because I had my website. I took it down after quite a few years just because I just wasn't able to make anything work out of it. And if I wanted to rebuy it now, I would have to spend, let me see, about $1,000 more than the last time I had to spend money on it. So hang on to that one. That's
I will. I am clinging on to it.
All right. Well, everybody, this has been the Impactful Coaching Podcast. I have been Joseph, and you have been a wonderful audience. As always, you can always reach out to us, feedback, ideas, suggestions, whatever it is. We have interviews at impactfulcoachingpodcast.com, but you can also email me, joseph@impactfulcoachingpodcast.com. It is spelled the way you think. And so with that, Elizabeth, one more thank you for the road. And to everybody, this has been a great show. And as I am still working on my sign off, I'm pretty close to it. I almost got it. It is just a matter of, there's a lot of things that you can do in life, and whatever it is that you choose to do, it is our hope and our mission to make it impactful. Oh, I am like 90% of the way there. It is so close to being good. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for this wonderful conversation.
You too.